Hi everyone, welcome to this really interesting and what we hope is thought-provoking session from us here at Succeed with Dyslexia. It is a special time, it's Dyslexia Awareness Time this month in October, so we are all about Go Red. That's why I've got the Go Red t-shirt on, and you'll see this our lovely image here on my slide as well. Because it is a special time, we've joined forces as well with some special organisations and very special individuals too. So I'm joined by Sue Floor MBE, who is the manager at the Adult Dyslexia Centre. Hi, Sue.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks very much for inviting me here. Yeah, I'm from the Adult Dyslexia Centre. We've been going for about 20 years. We're there to help adults, so yeah, join
Yeah.
us if you need to.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Sue. And I've got some contact details at the end
Thank
that we
you.
can share because you guys have got a helpline and everything, haven't you?
Yes.
And SWD and ADC work together with our AND network as well. And I'll explain that at the end of the session too. So lots of exciting work. We're also very lucky here at SWD because we also partner with the Dyscalculia network from time to time. That's why we've managed to convince the wonderful Kat Edel to join us this evening. Hi, Kat.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. We know that when we join together like this, guys, it's quite special, isn't it? But Kat, would you do us a favour and talk us through what the network is? I know that we don't always work with you in this way, so I've got a few slides, if that's okay, as you talk through the fantastic work you do there.
Oh, thank you. That's great. Perfect.
This is a lovely first slide to start with.
Rob and I visiting a train station. We spend a lot of time at train stations. So the Dyscalculia Network is a community interest company working to raise awareness of dyscalculia and maths difficulties. And it was set up by Rob Jennings and myself, and we're both dyscalculia specialist maths teachers who felt that there was a need for more awareness of dyscalculia because we're very lucky in this country to have loads of brilliant organisations like the ones that Donna and Sue work with, but we didn't have anything for dyscalculia, so that's why we started the network. Could you move on a slide? Thank you.
Yes,
Donna.
of course I can.
So what we aim to do with the Dyscalculia Network is we aim to raise awareness of dyscalculia. That's really important to us. We have a specialist dyscalculia assessor and tutor directory, and those assessors and tutors, some of those work with adults as well, so it's not just for children. We work with adults with dyscalculia and maths difficulties, as well as parents and educational professionals, and more recently with employers as well. And we also provide maths difficulties and dyscalculia training, both for workplaces and for schools and education establishments, colleges and universities and so on. For adults, and obviously that's really important tonight, we have an adult advisory board. This is a great picture. I love this picture of everybody in our last meeting. And they're an amazing support to us at the Dyscalculia Network, because what we feel is really important is to talk to adults about their lived experience, about what they would like to see, what they wish they'd had at school, and the difference we can make in the workplace as well. And all that information can be found through our website. Bear with us on the website. We're just in the middle of having a new website design, which is going to have a lot more for adults moving forward, because that's a priority for us.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. That's a great overview. And you know, you spoke there about the lived experience, and that's kind of what tonight's about belonging and helping folks see themselves in others across their organisation as well. So it's a perfect segue really into our time together tonight. For those of you listening to this who really would like to reach out to Sue at the ADC and the team there, and to Kat at the Dyscalculia Network, on our final slide, I also share the contact details, and of course for us here at Succeed with Dyslexia, it's brilliant to hear from our community, and we're always there to support as well. So thank you to Kat and Sue. They're going to hand back over to me now as I go through this evening, but I'm sure that you're going to hear that there's links across to everything that we know that our organisations are committed to. And then what we'll do is we'll share our contact details. For the recording we'll stop, but for those who are attending live this evening, that's when we'll take some questions as well. So I really hope that you enjoy the session this evening. So I think a good place to start is kind of just an awareness really of what neurodiversity is these days. You know, we've just heard Kat talking around dyscalculia, and of course you see dyscalculia here as one of the differences that sits under that umbrella term neurodiversity. We are very aware now, aren't we, that there's so much out there around neurodiversity. There's lots of awareness, lots of information, and lots of folks speaking up about being neurodivergent themselves, which has got to be a good thing. I think sometimes, however, when we don't know a lot about neurodiversity, and for sure, some of you listening to this, maybe this is quite new to you and you've come here to listen to this session because you want to find out more. So when we don't always know a lot around neurodiversity, sometimes it's tricky when there's lots and lots of conversations and lots of noise to be able to navigate through in terms of, okay, what is neurodiversity? What are the salient points? What's really important for me to be aware of? And I think a good place to start then is to be aware, I guess is the word, of what those differences are that sit under this umbrella term of neurodiversity. So, as I said, we've just been listening to Kat talking about the dyscalculia network and the need for the network because there seemed to be a lack of support, especially for our adults in the community. So, of course, we see dyscalculia here as a neurodivergent difference in that way. Of course, Sue is from the Adult Dyslexia Centre, but I also know that the team there support adults with many different neurodivergent differences as well. But of course, dyslexia is part of the key part of their role. And yes, of course, dyslexia is here. We also see dysgraphia, and just recently it was Dysgraphia Awareness Time. I think it was the 2nd of October. And for a lot of us, we're not sure about what dysgraphia is, are we? It's not a new difference as such, but I think unfortunately it may have been forgotten about a little bit because we focus so much on dyslexia. Sometimes we can forget that there's other differences that maybe have overlaps into some of the similar traits and characteristics that dyslexia may have around letters and words and handwriting and so on, and that's where dysgraphia comes into play. If you're interested to find more about these differences, I am going to share our contact details at the end, so please do reach out to us here, for example, at Succeed with Dyslexia. We're always happy to signpost and to share the resources that we have. We've got a free webinar coming up soon, for example, around dysgraphia, because we know it's a huge issue that unfortunately a lot of us don't know a lot about. We've also got ADHD, of course we do, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And a lot of people are saying at the moment that there's a real epidemic around ADHD, certainly with our adults. Now, that doesn't mean that suddenly we've got a lot of adults who've suddenly developed ADHD. Of course it doesn't. But what it means is that more and more individuals, especially us adults, are becoming aware that we may have been living with ADHD since our childhood and actually want to be identified in that way because it's a missing part of who we are to know that about ourselves. And I think, I can safely say that there's a lot of stereotypes and misunderstandings around ADHD. I suppose a lot of us focus in on the fact that hyperactivity is part of the title of ADHD. Yes, for sure, we know hyperactivity is there and impulsiveness and so on, but ADHD is more than that. And there are so many gifts and talents associated with ADHD. It's really important that we get educated about that difference and we listen to the lived experience of individuals who are living with ADHD as well. It's really important. And I'm going to talk a lot about that lived experience this evening because it's an integral part of what we mean when we start to talk about belonging. We then have developmental language disorder, and often in a diagram like this one, we will see a difference like that or something around communication in that way. And of course, again, this can overlap with the other differences, and individuals with dyslexia, for example, may have communication challenges as part of their dyslexia as well. There's lots of overlaps here, and that's where, it's important that we understand what these differences are and give them the respect in their own right. It may surprise some of you as well to see that Tourette's syndrome is here. It's not a new difference, but in some ways it's newer to the neurodiverse family, so to speak, because it's finally being recognised as a neurodivergent difference alongside, and if we look a little bit further up on this diagram, we have OCD as well, obsessive compulsive disorder. It's not a new difference, but it's newer into the family. I said, a little while ago when I was speaking to someone and they'd said to me, oh, it was the perfect way of trying to summarise this. I often say nobody gets left behind when we're looking at neurodiversity. And I guess that's the sentiment when we are thinking about differences like Tourette syndrome and OCD. It's important that we look at the whole person. And I can't tell you the amount of times over the years I've had people who say to me, I've got dyslexia and I've got Tourette syndrome. But in my workplace, they focused in on dyslexia. I'm really appreciative of that. But actually, the Tourette part of me has been forgotten about. It's not really discussed. And to work with me as a whole person, you really need to look at all my differences in that way. So it's brilliant that we've got those differences there. And I suppose, what I would say to everybody listening to this is watch this space, because we know that the neurodivergent family is a growing family. So what we share with you now in 2023, it may be slightly different if we revisited this into next year and so on, because more and more differences are being raised awareness around, and more people are speaking up about their own differences and identifying themselves as neurodivergent in that way. Of course, we have autism here, and I suppose like ADHD, it's a difference that a lot of us think that we know a lot around, but it's again really important we get educated because there's lots of stereotypes around that difference. Again, really important that we listen to the individuals with that lived experience of autism as well. We have dyspraxia here. And that's a difference that sometimes we refer to as developmental coordination disorder, so DCD. Mostly here in the UK, we talk about dyspraxia, however. And again, it's similar patterns. Let's get educated about what these differences are. And October is also dyspraxia awareness time as well. There's often overlaps across into dyslexia and dyspraxia. Sometimes organisational challenges and processing challenges can be discussed around dyspraxia, and that's kind of overlaps into dyslexia as well, but it is a standalone difference with its own identity as well. OCD, as we said, it's newer to the family, so to speak. Some of you might be very much aware of that at the moment because if you were aware, David Beckham's just done a new Netflix documentary at the time that we're talking about these subjects. And it's been a lot in the paper over the last few days because he's very open about his OCD. And so there's been lots of discussions about OCD in the press and social media at the moment. And that's what happens, doesn't it, when somebody like David Beckham speaks out about their difference, whatever it might be. It triggers conversations on the back of it. And what we hope is it brings a few barriers down for individuals to feel a bit more confident to talk about their differences in that way. And as we said, right at the top here, we've got dyscalculia. And it was really important that we worked with the network for this session. It's great to have the network support this evening because we know, certainly amongst our adults as well, that there is a lack of awareness around dyscalculia and a lot of misunderstandings around what it actually is as well. That's why it's brilliant to see Kat and Rob's work at the Dyscalculia Network. It really is long overdue to raise these kind of awareness. Something else that's long overdue is thinking about, all our other identities beyond the labels of ADHD, autism, dyscalculia, whatever it may be. And I think as the years go by now, we are getting better, aren't we, at thinking about who we all are in our many different identities that all come together to make us the wonderfully unique people that we are. And the phrase that we use a lot nowadays as a shorthand way to explain that is intersectionality, isn't it? And it's a word that I guess a lot of us are familiar with. And it's a shorthand phrase to talk about all those different identities. And this diagram's, I guess, quite a nice way to show that about the different identities that we will all have in, some way. It's interesting in a session like this one when we think about neurodiversity, because actually it's really important that we think about the person beyond the label of whatever difference it may be. Because what we know, and it's certainly true for our adults, that the different identities that we will all have can come together and really influence and impact on somebody's journey around neurodiversity. And we know that some of these differences impact more than others on somebody's life journey around their differences. So, for example, we know that gender can interplay with somebody's journey around neurodiversity. So, unfortunately, what we find, and it's certainly with older females, females are less likely to have been identified with their neurodivergent difference purely because the fact that they are female. And, for many years, we thought that this may have been, ironically, for biological reasons, which seems crazy now to think back that that's how we used to think. We know now it's sociological reasons, because for a variety of reasons of how our education system's been in the past and how our society's been, females have been overlooked in terms of being identified and so on. And if we add age into that, so as I said, for older females, yes, a lot of older females haven't had an identification because of the intersectional identities that they have. And it's a similar pattern for people of colour as well. So ethnicity and race can interplay to mean, unfortunately, a person of colour is less likely to be identified with whatever difference it may be that they are living with. Now, happily, the times are changing. The more that we are aware of this, the more we're able to bring those barriers down. But we're not there yet. We are on the journey, but the journey is not complete. So it's really important that we keep having these conversations and that we are aware of this. And a spotlight I want to share this evening as we record this in October 2023, it is also Black History Month in October, of course it is. And the theme of this year's Black History Month is saluting sisters. And as I've just said, we are very aware that for people of colour and for females, they are unfortunately often less likely to have been identified around their own neurodivergent difference. And this is often, unfortunately, because of discrimination and because of the way our society has operated over many years. So I've shared here very wise words from a lady called Jeanette Morgan to spotlight this evening. It gives us lots to think about, doesn't it, about where we need to be heading as a society and a culture around these issues. And Jeanette spoke very eloquently as a Black female, as somebody with a Nigerian background as well, around her journey around neurodiversity. And what I've shared here with you is a snippet from a poem that she put together. And again, it gives us a lot to think about. So what Jeanette says here is, when so many things can hold you back for nothing more than being Black, who would want another label that says that you are not able? And that's really powerful message that's come from Jeanette. I guess what she's sharing here is that for a lot of people of colour, there's a fear about getting another label, which potentially could be, used against you. You could be discriminated against around and misunderstood and unseen and feel like you don't belong. So we have that happening where people are too scared to speak up. And then it operates within a broader picture of a society that does consider, unfortunately, certain members of our society to be invisible and to be unseen in those ways. And that's where we have these different parts of people's journeys interplaying with their journey around neurodiversity. If we are serious then around belonging, and that's the theme for this evening, we need to be very aware of those barriers and figure out what we try to do to bring them down, for ourselves and also in our workplaces and across our society as well. When I knew I wanted to focus really this time around on belonging, it came to my kind of realization, if I can put it like that, because the research that I was doing in my role here at Succeed, and I spend a lot of time training and working with big organisations, as you can imagine, I kept reading how important belonging was. And I remember saying to my colleagues here, I think maybe we need to do something about belonging, because it was a word that kept coming up time and time again. I mean, it's a brilliant word, isn't it? Belonging has got a lovely sense to it, even beyond a session like this one. It's a very powerful, emotive word. But actually, if we start to think about what belonging means in the world of work, and then specifically around neurodiversity, it takes on another dimension to it, really. And happily, the guys here at Succeed agreed with me that we wanted to put something together around belonging. So I hope what I'm going to share with you now is really useful and gives us lots to think about as well. So what I tried to do is kind of think, okay, what is belonging at the actual bare bones of it? What are we talking about here? And what I share, hopefully, it really rings true for you. So we've got this idea that what we want with belonging is that an employee has a sense that their uniqueness is accepted and even, and I love this word, even treasured by their organisation and colleagues. I mean, how brilliant is that, to feel treasured? It's also we want to make sure that somebody feels comfortable to share their opinions and to feel truly cared about and accepted. So accepted has got to be another part of this. And also then we've got this idea that somebody doesn't feel afraid as well. So not afraid to be yourself. And I think, this is a pretty good place to start our ideas around belonging, that it's people who aren't scared, you feel valued and treasured and accepted and comfortable. And I think all those traits should come together in a very positive way to make people feel that they really do belong. Whilst I was researching, I also found, and this is really useful for us actually in a session like this, that there are these 5 pillars of belonging. And actually it's a really great way that we can start to think about these ideas. So we've got here welcomed, known, included, supported, and connected. And again, really useful pillars that if we start to accommodate these ideas about being welcomed or being known, then happily, I think it takes us to a great place about making sure that we are encouraging folks to feel like they belong within our organisations. Because if we're able to do that, then the message that we share is so important, isn't it? And this is what I want to share this evening with you. If we're serious about encouraging people to feel like they belong and we work around those 5 pillars, then the message that we're giving to folks is that we're listening, that you are an important part of our team, we value you, we care, we acknowledge your experiences, we are inclusive, and my personal favourite, this last one, we get it. And you can't say fairer or clearer than that. We get it. And I think that's really where we all need to be, about understanding what we're talking around neurodiversity, isn't it? And I think we also need to be confident enough to say, well, actually, we don't get it yet, but we want to get it. So can we go on a journey with you and you share with us, your experiences and your wisdom, so that eventually we do understand and we do get it. So it's this kind of honesty, I think, that we need to be sharing amongst our individuals and the people in our workforce in general as well. So what I've done now is, and hopefully you'll find it really useful, I've took each of those pillars and I've kind of drawn together, to my mind, the important traits and good practice and top tips that I think sit underneath it to encourage, for example, as we see here, a sense of being welcomed. So I think in our organisations, if we think about, okay, what does it mean to be welcomed? Immediately, I think for most of us, we're going to think about, the very beginning of a journey that somebody would have into our workplaces, aren't we? So we're going to think about the recruitment process. Is that neurodiverse friendly? How do we onboard individuals as well? Do we have neurodivergent good practice as a matter of standard? You know, have we got things in place that we offer to everybody, whether we know that they're neurodivergent or not? And that's a really interesting kind of attitude to have, and I think it's a really important one. We know that a lot of the differences are classed as disabilities. We know that under the Equality Act we have an anticipatory duty to support individuals, whether they are sharing with us or not, that they are neurodivergent, for example. So yes, we need to develop a benchmark of good practice, a baseline that we offer to everybody. One of the ways that we can do that, as you can see here on one of my bullet points, I've got communications. You know, developing a dyslexia and neurodivergent friendly approach to communication is a great benchmark to develop that we do with everybody. Thinking about our language as well. You know, language is so important these days. It alludes to what we really think about individuals and situations and so on, and it's connected to culture. So we need to make sure that our language is up to date. How do we refer to neurodivergent differences and so on? So it's all these things that come together, to my mind, which encourage a sense of being welcomed within an organisation. And one of my personal favourites is right at the bottom here, this person-centred approach. So it's about working with individuals one-to-one and taking somebody on a journey rather than just working at somebody, not listening to them and just imposing, you know, what we think is best on them without putting them at the heart of the journey that we want to take them on. And here's a lived experience voice. So we've got Emma sharing her lived experience. When my manager shared that she too had ADHD, it made me feel understood, and I thought, yes, you get me. I hope she stays my manager for a long time, because her experiences mean that she knows intuitively how to get the best out of me and be a great ally. And that's brilliant to hear Emma's experience in that way. And being a great ally, that's a phrase that we hear a lot these days. I know I certainly do as I work with organisations, because they're interested in starting to set up networks of allies to help individuals like Emma to feel inspired and to feel supported. It's a great way that we can work together in that way. Because what we want to make sure for somebody like Emma is that she feels known. And this is one of the other pillars. And what does it mean to feel known? I think at the very heart, it's being listened to, isn't it? It sounds so obvious, but again, you know, people can forget this. This might interest some of you. I worked with a very large organisation this week during Dyslexia Awareness Time, and somebody in the group had said to me, Donna, I've got a colleague coming through soon that's got dyslexia. They've disclosed they're a brand new, you know, exciting new colleague that's going to join us. Any top tips on how we can get the best out of them? And I said, well, the first step is really to talk to them and listen to them about what's going to work for them. And I saw the individual kind of take almost a, you know, a kind of leaning back, puzzled look on the Teams call. And you know, it was really interesting to see their reaction of surprise. I was surprised that they were surprised, because I thought, isn't that really obvious about speaking to someone and asking them what works for them, and you know, how can we get the best out of you, or how can we work with you in a way that suits you and suits your way of thinking? But maybe not, you know, maybe not everybody thinks like that. So it's important that we ponder these things when we're thinking about belonging, because that's a great way that we can show somebody that we value them and we want them to feel belonged, that we're actually listening to them. It's also about allies, and that's what Emma had said in her quote, wasn't it? That her manager was a great ally for her. And also, do we have a clear path through? And that might sound a bit odd for me to say, but what I mean is, you know, if somebody's talking to us about ADHD or whatever difference it might be, have we got a path through of where we know that we're going to take somebody on a journey and we understand what that journey is going to look like? Yes, we know it's going to be slightly different for every individual, but there is a bit of a pattern to how we would work with individuals, for example, who've got ADHD. So do we have those pathways open, or is everybody in a puzzle? And if we get a new member of the team who's talking about ADHD, we're all in a frenzy because we're not sure what to do. And that's the opposite of where we want to be, isn't it? We want to feel confident and comfortable to be able to work with folks in whatever way that they need us to work with them in as well. So yes, these are kind of all the traits, I think, on this particular side that come together to what I hope show people feeling that we know them and that we understand them and that we want to get to know them as well. Here's a quote from Mia. And what Mia says is, I look around my organisation and I just don't see anyone else like me. I am a black, neurodiverse woman, totally proud of who I am, but it would be so powerful if there were more colleagues like me around. Sometimes I can feel incredibly isolated and I get tired of always being a lone voice. And this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's brilliant that Mia has stood up and is happy to be an ally and speak out in her organisation. But it's really disappointing that she's the only one. And that's what we need to avoid, isn't it? It's great she's spoken out, but it's also disappointing that she feels so tired because she's on her own. And I've heard this from individuals quite a few times. People saying, I am exhausted about being everybody's go-to person in my team because I've got dyslexia. I know there's other colleagues with dyslexia, but no one else will speak out and I'm tired. And when it's dyslexia awareness time, it's always me who gets asked to give a talk. And it's this type of a sentiment we want to try and avoid, isn't it? When somebody will say, I know there's other colleagues here, but nobody else will speak out, you have to start to wonder why people aren't speaking out other than just somebody like Mia. And that tells us that sometimes maybe we're still not quite there yet in terms of the culture and that sense of belonging. So that Mia essentially is on her own in terms of always being everybody's go-to person. So it's really important that we support somebody like Mia, but we need to get more allies and champions standing up with and standing with Mia so that she's not on her own. And we need to make sure that somebody like Mia therefore feels included. And, when we think about inclusion, there's lots written about inclusion, isn't there, around our education and so on. In terms of when we're thinking about it in the world of work, if we want to give somebody this sense of belonging, I guess it's, again, what do our policies say? We need to look right at the top and think about what's there. Have we got a neurodiverse friendly approach, a standard? As you're listening to me talk, you're going to see there's patterns across everything I'm saying. It's the same issues, if you like, coming through as we look at these 5 pillars. Have we done our best to remove the barriers for somebody like Mia? And, we know that sometimes we can't always bring all the barriers down, but are we committed to really working hard to bring in as many issues and barriers down as we can to support somebody like Mia and put lots of strategies in place as well? Here's Stefan sharing his thoughts. Was very pleased in work when they had a call out for neurodiverse colleagues to volunteer as champions. It's made such a difference as I know I have someone I can go to for a chat and they always bring the neurodivergent perspective to our work. To be honest, it's made a lot of us now more confident to speak out. A total win-win. And this is where we need to be. Stefan is almost in the opposite place to Mia, isn't he? He's got lots of people around him who've all spoken out because there's been a call out from work to have champions and allies in this way, so he doesn't feel alone. And that's what we want to try and aspire to. Because what we want is for people like Stefan and Mia to feel supported. And I think this particular pillar is the most practical one, if you like. In some ways, it's the easiest one that we can figure out what we do around because it's all the practical things that we need to have in place to support somebody. That's the reasonable adjustments, it's extra time, for example, if that's what they need, technology, it's training, it's different ways of working with individuals. So that all comes together to give our individuals a sense that they are respected and understood and ultimately supported. Here's Ravi sharing his lived experience. Before working here, I used to leave a job every couple of years. I just used to think that was what I did. I realise now it was because the adjustments I had in place in previous jobs weren't a good fit for me. This organisation is totally different. They actually worked with me to discuss what I needed to get the best out of me. My job has changed since COVID. They even checked in with me then too to make sure what I had in place was working. It's brilliant. And that's a great message from Ravi. You know, that's what we want, that somebody like Ravi feels really supported, that we've worked hard to put in the adjustments in place. It's a perfect fit for Ravi. What's interesting now is he shares that previous to that, he was jumping around from job to job. And I know certainly in my experience working with adults, I've had lots of people like Ravi share that. I always leave a job after a couple of years. That's just me. I get bored or whatever. But actually what Ravi's saying here is he's looked back. It's not because he was bored. It was because actually where he's worked previously, he wasn't supported. He didn't have those right adjustments in place. And that's where we often say to organisations, you know, this is a better way of working for somebody like Ravi, but it also makes perfect business sense as well, because what it means is that we retain Ravi. Ravi's not going to leave us after a few years, despite the fact we've invested a lot of time and energy into Ravi to get him to be a fantastic member of our team. We're not going to lose him, because what it means is we've got the right support in place. So again, you know, it makes good business sense to be able to support individuals like Ravi. And what we want is Ravi to feel connected as well. And this is one of the other pillars. We want him to feel supported, have a network in place. And we know that networks can be really useful. Lots of signposting information. We want to make sure that there's champions and allies there, and that, you know, managers understand how to get the best out of an individual like Ravi. And here's Paul sharing his experience around a neurodiversity network. He says having the network has made such a difference. You don't feel so alone and isolated. I know there are others like me here. We keep it real and we value honesty too. Can't begin to tell you the positive impact that this has had on me. We always have laughs along the way too, which helps. And I think this is brilliant because it shows from what Paul's experiences at the benefits of having a network. And it's certainly something that I recommend into organisations. I think that combined with having allies or champions is a brilliant way that we can encourage an inclusive culture within our organisations. What I also love, though, is that Paul talks about having some laughs along the way. And that's what it's about too, as well, isn't it? It's the camaraderie that a network can create so that you know that it's a group of people who really understand you. This is a really interesting one, and I've been saying this all this time during Dyslexia Awareness Time and asking organisations what they think, because I actually don't know the answer to this one, everyone. But as I was researching belonging, what came up more and more was the opposite of belonging potentially being fitting in. And it's a really interesting idea, isn't it? So I pose the question to everyone, is the opposite of belonging fitting in? It's something to really think about, doesn't it? And here's Brené Brown explaining why she thinks it is. She says, fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. And it's really interesting to start to think about this idea when we think about neurodiversity. Because I think if we focus too much on fitting in to the detriment of belonging, what we can inadvertently sometimes start to see are some of these issues. We can start to see people feeling very misunderstood and feeling invisible and feeling like another, not part of the team, feeling separate, being scared to speak up, having imposter syndrome. And this is a word that we use a lot now, masking. So hiding who they are sometimes to try and fit in can often lead to masking. Now, masking is a newer word that we talk a lot about these days, but the idea is not new. It's about people hiding themselves in order to fit in or assimilate or whatever you might want to think the word is. But it's really interesting to think about masking. And again, as you'd imagine in my job, I speak to so many professionals who will share with me that they've been masking for years and want to take the mask off to be their authentic selves, but are scared about the reaction they'll get from others, and maybe scared as well for themselves because how awful the mask has been in some ways. Maybe it's been a bit of a security blanket for that individual as well. So it can be very painful and traumatic to remove the mask, even though sometimes you really want to take that mask off. And you know, we are talking a lot this year. The theme of this year's Dyslexia Awareness Time is uniquely you, which is a lovely phrase actually. And actually, the more we think about the concept of uniquely you, the more we think about actually, if we are our unique selves, that means that we're not masking anymore, doesn't it? And if we're not masking, maybe that's because we feel comfortable enough, because we feel like we belong here. So all these issues overlap. And it's really interesting. And what I share on this slide, I won't go through it all now, but if you'd like these slides, please just do let me know. When we send out the recording, we'll send out a copy of the slides too, so you can have a look, because I'd really like you to have a deeper look and spend some time reading it. But I've had people over the years tell me that the different extremes they've gone to in order to hide themselves, to mask, from, as it says here, you know, almost coaching themselves to copy a person's tone of voice, faking smiles, faking facial expressions, learning how to maintain eye contact when it's something they feel incredibly uncomfortable to do. And what we tend to find for individuals who are always masking and hiding is it does lead to burnout. It can lead to absolute exhaustion because it's so tiring not to be your real self. And here is Charlie sharing their experience around masking in a way more eloquent way than somebody like me can. So what does Charlie say? They say, I never realised that I changed who I was to fit in at work. I guess it's called masking. And it was exhausting for me, not just emotionally, but I actually used to feel physically tired by the end of the day too. Since my identification and the journey that has followed, I'm actually the real me at work now. It's been tough finally getting to this place, but so worth it. And, you know, I hear that sentiment a lot from individuals like Charlie. You might be on that road yourselves listening into this session. Please know that you're not on your own. That's why groups like the Adult Dyslexia Centre, us here at Succeed with Dyslexia, the British Dyslexia Association Helpline and so on, and all the other associations that support many individuals across many differences, including, of course, CAT's Dyscalculia Network too. That's, you know, we're here to support our community in that way. So please know that you're not on your own and you can reach out. I suppose as we start to think about the importance of belonging, and I hope I've managed to convince you that this is actually a really important part of feeling, you know, good about yourself in the world of work. It actually gives lots of benefits to us if we try and figure out how we can encourage our neurodivergent individuals to feel like they belong. It does reduce stress and anxiety. You know, we heard Charlie speaking there about their experience about, you know, the stress, the upset about wearing a mask and being so tired emotionally and physically. Happily, I think that if we encourage belonging, we are more likely to encourage people like Charlie to feel confident to be their authentic selves as well. And as it says here, encourages self-advocacy, so people to speak up for themselves in that way. It creates, you know, role models within our organisations. It also challenges unconscious bias. You know, unconscious bias is often caused by a lack of awareness, a lack of education, isn't it? If we've got the lived experience of our communities at the heart of what we do, then that really challenges unconscious bias in people who don't know a lot about this stuff, but hopefully are more than happy to learn. And so again, you know, it helps all our communities because we're showing each other how we can get the best out of ourselves as well. It also helps to create this safe and secure environment. And I guess similarly with belonging, there's been so much written at the moment, and quite rightly so, about psychologically safe environments in the world of work and how important they are as well. And I would argue that belonging's got to be a part of that as we try and make sure that our environments are safe places to be in terms of our well-being and so on. I love this quote. And as I've been delivering this session this week, this is the quote that I've ended the session on. It's a brilliant one from Mohammed, because I really want to end a session about belonging on something really positive. And I hope you agree with me. It's a great message that he shares with us. He says, now I'm in my 50s. I finally feel confident to stand up for those of us who have dyslexia. Since I have spoken out, there have been so many colleagues who have approached me to thank me or who want to stand with me. We now have a bit of an army going on, and it's fantastic. Me speaking up has caused ripples of hope. And it's those ripples of hope, I think, that we always desperately want to create, isn't it? I was so pleased when Mohammed shared his thoughts in that way, because it's so inspirational. And it is those ripples of hope that I hope this session might have unleashed some gentle ripples in terms of our thinking as well. And it's also the other organisations that have linked with us here this evening that we're so appreciative of, that also are in the business of causing ripples of hope as well. So a big thank you to them. I said at the beginning I was going to share their contact details. Of course, here's ours at Succeed. I've popped my email address on here. I'd love to hear from you. Please do keep in touch. But we've also got the Adult Dyslexia Centre here, their helpline number and their email address. And of course, we heard from Kat this evening. The Dyscalculia network is there, ready to support. They're also creating ripples of hope in their community. So please do reach out to those individuals as well. Before we say goodbye on the recording then, and I do hope everybody listening to this has enjoyed the session, I just also want to mention another group that's causing ripples of hope. It's our AND group, which Succeed with Dyslexia are so proud to be a part of. So who is AND? AND stands for the Adult Network, Neurodiversity and Dyslexia. And Succeed with Dyslexia are standing alongside, we are in a coalition with the ADC, with Adult Dyslexia Centre, with Hampshire Dyslexia Association and the Yorkshire Rose Dyslexia Association as well. And we wanted to come together because we were all very aware that our adult community needed lots of support. Everything we do is free. That's our passion. We want to make sure that we offer free, trusted support and advice. And the way that we operate is that the last Thursday of every month, we will run at 7 o'clock UK time, we will run a free webinar with an expert or a discussion. Half of the session will be the expert, and then the other half is a good chance for everybody to come and ask questions from our experts, including, myself and the other groups of the association as well, of the network. So we hope that we can welcome you. Again, we put this together in the hope that this also causes ripples of hope. So on that note, I just want to thank everybody who's listening to the recording. We will stop the recording now. For those who are on live, we are going to stop and take some questions as well. So thank you so much for your time.